Hey guys, it's Ellie. Welcome back to Bite-Sized Book of Mormon. I'm glad to have you with me. So, if you've never been here before, this is just a podcast where I read through one chapter of the Book of Mormon each episode, and to give a little bit of context, a little bit of insight, a little bit of good times. So, stick around. So, from our last episode, we read Alma chapter 62, which is kind of the end of this chapter of the war chapters. They take a city back, they give a bunch of prisoners space to live with the Ammonites, and there is peace. And it's kind of awesome. Captain Moroni retires, which is amazing. And now, we're going to read the actual last chapter in the Book of Alma, which is, by the way, the longest book in the entire Book of Mormon, in Alma chapter 63. And it came to pass in the commencement of the 36th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, that Shiblon took possession of those sacred things which had been delivered unto Helaman by Alma. And he was a just man, and he did walk uprightly before God, and he did observe to do good continually, to keep the commandments of the Lord his God, and also did his brother. And it came to pass that Moroni died also, and thus ended the 36th year of the reign of the judges. And it came to pass that in the 37th year of the reign of the judges, there was a large company of men, even to the amount of 5,400 men, with their wives and their children, departed out of the land of Zarahemla into the land which was northward. And it came to pass that Hagoth, he being an exceedingly curious man, therefore he went forth and built him an exceedingly large ship on the borders of the land Bountiful by the land Desolation, and launched it forth into the west sea by the narrow neck which led into the land northward. And behold, there were many of the Nephites who did enter therein, and did sail forth with much provisions, and also many women and children, and they took their course northward, and thus ended the 37th year. And in the 38th year, this man built other ships, and the first ship did also return, and many more people did enter into it, and they also took much provisions, and set out again into the land northward. And it came to pass that they were never heard of more, and we suppose that they were drowned in the depths of the sea. And it came to pass that one other ship also did sail forth, and whither she did go, we know not. And it came to pass that in this year there were many people who went forth into the land northward, and thus ended the 38th year. So this chapter kind of continues the epilogue of last chapter, right? It's kind of saying, well, what happened in the aftermath of the war ending? And I actually love these chapters because it shows that, like, wow, things go back to normal. Things are boring again, finally. And even though it may seem strange that it spends so many verses focusing on how people left to the land northward, how this guy Hagoth took a bunch of boats, and how some of the boats came back, and then they took more people, that seems pointless, but to me, it speaks to peace. They could not explore for years because they were locked in their fortified cities with the constant threat of Lamanites on their doorstep. They could not breathe. They were stuck in their cities. And now finally, they have the freedom to explore. They can finally spread out a little, become a little bit looser. And of course, they're never going to be completely undefended because the legacy of Captain Moroni cannot die so easily, I think. But they can be a little bit freer. And I think that is something that I don't even think about. Like in the war chapters, I don't think, wow, these people are suffering because they can't move or breathe or explore. But once the war is over, they can again. And it's like a breath of fresh air. And it's awesome. And finally, people like Hagoth can sate their curiosity. They can go explore new horizons and do new things. Finally, they're free of the constant Lamanite threat. And also I'm aware of a theory that the people of Hagoth and his group that kind of took boats and kind of just sailed off into the ocean, people think that they settled the Polynesian islands, which I don't think there's any evidence for or against that, but I don't know, it's kind of interesting. Although I'm pretty sure it's just speculation with the evidence that we actually have, so. Anyways, interesting stuff. And it came to pass in the 39th year of the reign of the judges, Shiblon died also, and Corianton had gone forth to the land northward in a ship to carry forth provisions unto the people who had gone forth into that land. Therefore it became expedient for Shiblon to confer those sacred things before his death upon the son of Helaman, who is called Helaman, being called after the name of his father. Now behold, all those engravings which were in the possession of Helaman were written and sent forth among the children of men throughout all the land, save it were those parts which had been commanded by Alma should not go forth. Nevertheless, these things were to be kept sacred and handed down from one generation to another. Therefore, in this year, they had been conferred upon Helaman before the death of Shiblon. So these past few verses talk about how the records live on, right? And I think we really, really take for granted how the Book of Mormon got into our hands today. Yes, there were a lot of miracles that happened in Joseph Smith's time, once he got the plates out of the ground. But getting those plates into the ground in the first place, getting them written and keeping them safe for centuries, is a massive amount of work. And there's this long chain of stewards of these records that were all in charge of keeping them current and keeping them safe and finding someone trustworthy and faithful to hand them off to once they died. If there was one break in this centuries-long chain of stewardship, we would not be holding the book that we're holding today. And I think that that is something that we take for granted. And so it's really cool to see that Shiblon, who is the current steward of the records, took such care to make sure that it got to someone who was worthy of it. And it says in verse 13, these things were to be kept sacred. They don't see these records as a diary or as a log. They see it as a godly command to keep these sacred things sacred. It didn't matter just because it was a cool historical record. It mattered because it was of God. And that is why the Book of Mormon matters today, because it is of God. Also something from verse 12, it talks about how all those engravings which were in the possession of Helaman were written and sent forth among the children of men throughout all the land. And so we're very well aware of how cool it is that we have the Book of Mormon today, and the good that it does, and the miracles that it makes in people's lives. But we forget that it did the same thing in its own day. Like, when it was being written, people were copying it and sending it among all the people to read from and learn from and to build their faith off of. So not only in the modern day have the records been helpful and faith-building and testimony-building, but they were then too, which is really cool because we see the Book of Mormon as a purely modern book. Like, yes, it was separate records in the time that it was being written, but it wasn't really pulled together until Mormon, and then it wasn't really read until our day. But it was read in its own day. Yes, it wasn't in the abridged format that we have today in our hands, but they were reading these records, and they were edifying the people. And I think that is pretty cool. And it came to pass also in this year that there were some dissenters who had gone forth unto the Lamanites, and they were stirred up again to anger against the Nephites. And also in this same year they came down with a numerous army to war against the people of Moronihah, or against the army of Moronihah, in the which they were beaten and driven back again to their own lands, suffering great loss. And thus ended the 39th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. And thus ended the account of Alma, and Helaman his son, and also Shiblon, who was his son. And thus also ends the longest book in the Book of Mormon. Thank you for being with me on this journey. We have made it to the end of Alma. And I liked this chapter. While a lot of people probably find chapters like this boring because they're just transition chapters, like nothing really happens besides like a couple of sporadic things that don't really get the spotlight, but I think it shows just how ordinary peace is. We're finally back to the norm. And also I think it's interesting that like the old guard is dying off. Like Captain Moroni is dead, Helaman is retired and or dead, and now their children are kind of taking up the torch and bringing forward the same cause that Captain Moroni and all of the people that he worked with fought for. So the cause is not dead with Captain Moroni, even though he is dead. I think that there's so much beauty in that. This transition is a transition chapter through and through. Like the old characters that we've been focusing on for the past 50 chapters are now dead. And now there are new people. Shiblon gets the plates and then he dies and gives them to Helaman, son of Helaman, who is the son of Alma. There's this long chain that is now coming to an end, and a new chain is beginning. A new torch is being lit and being carried forth among the Nephites, and this chapter exemplifies that. So anyways, on Wednesday, we are going to start the book of Helaman, which I am very excited about because, well, let's see what he does, right? We're not going to have Captain Moroni, we're not going to have Helaman, his father, but we're going to have Helaman the son, and new generals. So, yeah. Let's see how it all goes. So yeah, that is the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed. I definitely did, and it's quite an accomplishment, honestly, to get to the end of Alma, because it is a beast. So anyways, we've done it. I'm proud of myself, and proud of you guys for sticking around. So yeah, there's just a few links down in the show notes that I want to mention to you. The first one is a Let Me Know Where You Learn link, and if that one's not working, you can also just DM me on Instagram or email me, which is found in my YouTube bio, if you want to chat. So yeah, find those there. Next, there are a handful of links to access a digital copy of the Book of Mormon, so if you don't have your own copy, but you do want to read along, or find a study plan, or find a chapter, then click those down below. Next, there's a quick support the show link, so if you want to shoot me a few dollars and support what I do, that would be greatly appreciated. Next, we are on YouTube, so if you're not already watching on YouTube, you can go ahead and subscribe to that channel to find the podcast there twice a week, and also some YouTube short stuff that I post. And finally, we are on Instagram, so if you want to follow me where I'm the most active, you can go ahead and find me there. I post regularly on my story, and I also post my reels there as well. It is a lovely time. So yeah, that's all I've got for you today. I'll talk to you later. Bye.